Woodstock Festival in 1969 saw the first use of festival sound. Bill Hanley was nicknamed the father of festival sound. Could you explain about ways in which technology of amplifiers was used to project sound to much wider audiences?
Yeah, now I didn't know much about Bill Hanley. I had to actually research him slightly before I came here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the start of professional large PA systems. I don't know exactly what tech he was using, but I did read briefly that he was building his own cabs, enormous cabs, because either the stuff they wanted wasn't available,
Right.
or they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And they were using modern transistor amps,
Okay.
or at least partly using modern transistor amps, which were capable of going much more powerful with less distortion than a valve amp.
And that was different to previously because they were using much bigger amplifiers, or
It was going to be a much bigger gig than anything they'd done before. He did some work with, I've read this as well, actually I didn't know, he did some work with the Beatles tour, which had started in building these much bigger PA systems. The other thing I did notice, which was not to do with the amplifiers, but he actually started thinking about placement and target audience. At Woodstock, he built 70-foot high scaffolding towers and put half a PA at the top and half a PA at the bottom to reach across the hill. So certainly the start of big outdoor PA systems being, I guess, designed rather than just sort of happening, just by cobbling together whatever it is they could get.
Yeah.
They actually designed it, thought about it, and built it specifically.
Jimi Hendrix was famed for his control of distortion and feedback he got from the guitar and amplifiers he used. What advantages in amplification was causing this new thing called feedback?
Well, I'm not a guitarist, but I know that Jimmy started using Marshall amps when he came to Britain. So he came to Britain, so it was 67. And I know Marshall were building much more powerful amplifiers, but they were still valve-based, so it's still, I'm not sure how much the technology had moved on. They were bigger, they were more powerful, certainly, but the amps themselves, I'm not quite sure how much extra technology. Jimmy's genius was creatively using that feedback, wasn't it? That was the key to Jimmy. Nobody else, they'd always feedback was something to be avoided, but Jimmy started to use it creatively. I guess that was the innovation. So I don't know if the technology really helped, apart from the fact that it was bigger and more powerful amps. And he had more speakers to attack with his guitar, because he started using 4x10s and 4x12s.
In your opinion, what would you say was the most interesting technological development within the 60s, in the 60s music?
Well, I read that question, and that was interesting. I did think a couple of, I did think twice about it, but then I firmly came down on it's multi-tracking, it's recording, it's multi-tracking technology. That must be the innovation of the 60s. It must be the creativity that developed and the technology that then developed behind it. I think was enormous, and we're still doing that. Multi-tracking. Well, now we can do hundreds of tracks for cheap. But so it's got to be studio multi-track recording.
The lesser cabinet used by Jimi Hendrix on tracks such as Little Wing was used in new ways to project sound. Could you explain what this device and how it was doing it and how it was projecting sound to get the psychedelic feel?
Leslie cabinet, well, it was invented well before Jimmy. It was invented in the 50s, but it tied in with that hippie psychedelic sound perfectly. It's a great bit of kit. I mean, these days it would all be done in electronics or in software, but then it had to be done physically. So you've got two revolving speakers, a tweeter at the top, and a woofer, a larger 8 or 10 or 12-inch speaker at the bottom. The bottom speaker doesn't actually rotate, but there's a sort of a scoop underneath it that rotates, so it changes the directivity of the speaker. And the top tweeter physically does rotate, again changing the directivity. So you've got two or three things happening at the same time. You've got the speaker rotating, so you're getting amplitude modulation. You've got the speaker rotating, so you are continually changing the axis, so you're getting on-axis response, off-axis response, and you're getting the physical rotation, so you're getting a kind of Doppler effect as well as it zooms towards you and then zooms back away from you. So you've got three weird, wonderful effects all combining to give it, as you said, a psychedelic kind of sound.
Weird feel.
Weird, yeah. Designed for the, it was designed for the Hammond, although, Hammond would have nothing to do with it, although in the end they were absolutely inseparable. But then, other musicians started to use them. And Jimmy was one playing the guitar for it. He loved the sound of it, he loved that weird, whooshing sort of psychedelic sound. It fitted that genre perfectly. Great invention. These days, it wouldn't be solid. It wouldn't be something moving with motors and the size of a fridge. It would be, it would all be software, but the feeling's the same.
Yeah. Rupert Neve was noted for his work in building studio mixing desks, one of which was used at Sound City in California. This is now very outdated, but still favoured by many musicians. What, in your opinion, is it about an analogue desk which so many musicians still favour?
There's an interesting sort of parallel, isn't there? We like a preamp, and we measure preamps, and we look at specifications. We like preamps to be as transparent as possible, to not add colour, etc., etc. But of course, the classic thing about those Neves is they do add colour, and they add it beautifully.
Yeah.
They add it in a way that nobody had really had before, and nobody, well, if you can afford it, nobody really has done since.
Yeah.
It was just that beautiful electronics design. They were transistor-based, as far as I know, they were transistor-based, so they were right at the sort of forefront of transistor technology. And it's that analog feel. So we like our preamps, although we seem to want them transparent, we actually seem to like them colouring the sound somehow in a beautifully musical way.
Yeah.
If they're distorting, it's got to be harmonic distortion. Again, I did a tiny bit of research about me before I came here, and they were talking about that it almost seemed to add subharmonics under the principal frequencies.
Yeah.
I've never analysed one. I've never been fortunate enough to use one. But producers, engineers, musicians, they still like
an analog system.
That analog feel. That's why most studios these days seem to be, I say most studios, many studios nowadays seem to be stuck with the analog desks.
Yeah. Could you explain what was happening within mixing desks to give the typical 60s sounds, i.e. what was the route the signal was taking and what was being put through in terms of transistors?
Again, I don't know the technology terribly well. Early 60s, all of the preamps, all of the desks were valve-based. Everything the Beatles used, all of that multi-tracking, Sun Studios, etc., would all have been valve-based. Mid-60s, well, the transistor was invented in the early 50s, but by the mid-60s we were getting cheap, small transistors. Started in radios, used to call them solid-state radios. Phil will remember that, because solid state was a big thing then. But then they started using them in the desk, and as I've just said, some classic transistorized designs still, they were just so well designed. So musical, they describe them. Talk to guys who've been recording for years, like Paul Hodson, they describe preamps or EQ, they describe them as a very musical EQ, and it's purely down to design. You can I could build you a preamp tomorrow, dead easy. I could build an EQ system tomorrow, dead easy. It wouldn't be as good as those things, because I wouldn't be following their carefully thought out designs.
Right.